This story is titled, "You Owe Us for Your Childhood," my dad said, then handed me the invoice. Hi, everyone. Before we dive a quick favor. If you enjoy content like this, please hit the subscribe button. It's free, supports the channel, and make sure you never miss out on amazing video. Alright, let us get started. My parents called a family meeting out of the blue. Dad looked me straight in the eye and said, "You owe us for raising you," as he handed me a piece of paper. At first, I thought he had to be joking. But then Mom chimed in with, "You should be thankful we are only asking for this much." That is when I calmly reached into my bag and pulled out my own invoice. When they saw the number at the bottom, their faces lost all color. And believe it or not, that was not even the most shocking part. I am 31 now, and if I had to sum up my relationship with my parents in one word, it would be transactional. Not in the way that most parents expect you to pitch in around the house or be responsible. That is normal. What I mean is that nothing in our family was ever given without strings attached. Everything came with a condition. I never asked for much because I learned early on it would come at a cost. If I wanted something, I had to earn it or make a solid case for why I deserved it. I had to be useful. I had to prove I was worth investing in. My younger brother George, who is 29 now, never had to worry about that. I do not think the favoritism started off as obvious. At least, I do not think my parents thought it was favoritism. But the little things piled up over time. If I needed new shoes, I had to save up birthday money or bring home a report card full of A's. But if George needed them, Mom just bought them without a second thought. And if I ever questioned why, the answer was always something like, "He needs them for soccer," or "You're better with money, you can wait." That kind of thinking followed me well into my teenage years. At first, I told myself I was fine with it. I took pride in being independent. I liked knowing I could stand on my own 2 feet. But the older I got, the clearer it became, it was never really about independence. It was about what they expected from me. They expected me to take care of things on my own. They expected me to struggle and still manage. But George? He was treated like he was delicate, like he needed protection. And it was never just about the money. It was the way we were spoken to, the way things were handled. If George forgot about a project and failed a test, Mom would hug him and say, "It happens to everyone." The one time I missed a homework deadline, Dad scolded me and told me I was being irresponsible and needed to grow up. When George got busted drinking at 17, Dad just laughed and said, "Boys will be boys." But when I came home 5 minutes after curfew, I was grounded for 2 weeks. I never said a word. I knew complaining would not change anything. But there is one memory that has always stuck with me: my 16th birthday. I had been working part-time for almost a year, saving every dollar I could to buy myself a car. I knew they would not buy one for me, and I had accepted that. But deep down, a small part of me hoped they might help out, maybe pitch in a little or match what I had saved, maybe surprise me with an old used car or something. But just a week before my birthday, George turned 14, and my parents, who had never even offered to help me with a car, bought him a brand new gaming console. I should not have been surprised, but it still stung. I did not say anything, but Dad must have noticed my face because he told me, "We'll see about getting you a car in a couple of years, once you've shown you can handle the responsibility." That was the moment everything clicked. They were never going to help me. They never saw me the way they saw George. From that point on, I stopped hoping for anything from them. I kept working, saved up, and bought my own used car when I was 17. I paid my own way through college. I moved out the moment I could afford it. Meanwhile, George cruised through life. He dropped out of college not once, but twice. He walked away from jobs after a few months. And every time he hit a rough patch, Mom and Dad were right there with money, excuses, and fresh starts. I never asked them for a dime. Even when I was barely getting by, even when a little help would have made a difference, I stayed away. Looking back, I probably should have cut them off entirely. But a part of me, some foolish, hopeful part, thought that maybe things would change once I became an adult. Maybe they would finally see me differently. Maybe they would start treating me with respect. Then, last week, I got a text from my dad. "Family meeting. Be here Sunday at 3 p.m. Don't be late." I nearly ignored it. I was not a child anymore. I did not live in their house. But my curiosity got the better of me. It had been over 10 years since our last family meeting, so I showed up. The first thing I saw when I walked in was George, slouched on the couch, looking completely uninterested. He barely looked up when I came in. Mom and Dad were sitting at the kitchen table with these stern, unreadable expressions. Something immediately felt off. "Sit down," Dad said. I took a seat. Nobody said a word at first. Then Mom reached into a folder and slid a sheet of paper across the table toward me. I picked it up, wondering what it could be. Honestly, I had no idea what to expect, but the second my eyes scanned that page, my stomach dropped. It was a bill, a long, detailed invoice, and they were dead serious. For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood. The numbers seemed ridiculous. The text blurred in front of me. Room and board, groceries, household bills, medical costs, even fuel expenses from driving me places when I was a teen. The grand total? $79,850. I laughed, short and sharp, not because it was funny, but because I genuinely thought this had to be some twisted joke. You're not serious, I said, setting the page down. But they were. We are, Dad said, calmly. He spoke like he was explaining something simple to a kid. Raising a child costs money. We gave you a home, food, and education. Now that you're doing well, it's time you gave something back. I sat there, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. Then Mom jumped in, her tone gentler but no less firm. And you should be thankful we're only asking for this much. If we added up everything, the total would be much higher. I looked over at George, half expecting him to crack a joke or at least roll his eyes. Instead, he just gave a lazy shrug, like this was all perfectly normal. I shook my head in disbelief. You're serious? Dad let out a breath through his nose like he was getting tired of the conversation. You're doing well now. You've got a business, a good life. We've supported you for decades. The least you can do is help out now that you're in a position to. I felt a slow burn rising in my chest. You did not support me, I said, my voice steady. I worked my way through college. I paid for everything myself. I moved out as soon as I could. I have never once come to you for money. Dad's face tightened. Exactly, he said. And that's how we knew you could handle this. That is when I understood. They were not asking for the money. They truly believed I owed it, that I was some kind of investment they had made, and now it was time for their return. I looked down at the list again, scanning through the absurd line items. One jumped out near the bottom. Loan to cover family emergencies, $15,000. My brow furrowed. What is this? I pointed at the line. Mom shifted in her chair. That's when we needed help a few years back. You helped with the mortgage, remember? I remembered. They had called me out of nowhere, panicked, told me things were tight, and they just needed a little help to get by. I wired them the money that same day. No hesitation. That was not a loan, I said. I gave you that money. I never asked for anything back. Dad waved it off. Well, it just proves you had plenty to give. My grip on the paper tightened. So let me get this straight, I said, voice low. You expect me to pay you back for doing what every parent is supposed to do for their child? Mom let out a sigh, like I was being dramatic. You're missing the point, sweetheart. It's not just about the money, it's about appreciation. We worked hard to give you a good life. This is how you show us that you value it. I almost laughed again, but this time there was nothing funny about it. Appreciation? I repeated. You want appreciation for making me feel like a burden while George got everything handed to him? For treating me like I had to earn what he got for free? I spent my whole life trying to prove I was just as worthy as him. And now, staring at this ridiculous bill, I finally get it. I never was. I drew in a slow breath, then slid the invoice back across the table. No, Dad's jaw tightened. What did you say? No. I repeated, standing up. I'm not paying you. Mom's face stiffened. We're your parents. We took care of you for years. This is the least you can do. The least I can do? I let out a dry chuckle. I was a child. You decided to have me. You don't get to bill me for being born. Mom's mouth opened, then shut again, her face flushing red. Dad, on the other hand, leaned back, looking at me like I had just confirmed every disappointment he ever held. We always knew you were selfish, he said quietly. And that was it. I snapped. Selfish? Me. I pulled out my phone, scrolled a bit, and turned the screen toward them. Their eyes flicked to it. What's this? Mom asked. I gave a cold smile. My own invoice. Let me know if you'd like me to continue with the rest. I moved out when I was 19. I never saw a single cent of that so-called family money they claimed I benefited from, yet here they were, acting like I had. Neither of them responded to that. And then, finally, George spoke up. Why are you making such a big deal out of this? He said, his voice soaked in that familiar annoyance, like I was the unreasonable one. It's not like you're. I turned and stared at him. Really stared. There he was, slouched back in the chair, arms crossed, wearing a hoodie I knew Mom had bought him not long ago. He still lived under their roof, still drove a car they paid for, still leaned on them for whatever he needed. No wonder he could not see the problem. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my temper in check. This has nothing to do with the money, George, I said. It's about the fact that they actually believe they're owed something for doing the bare minimum as parents. Bare minimum? Mom repeated, her tone sharp, like I had insulted her soul. We gave you everything. We worked hard to make sure you had food, clothing, and a roof over your head. I held up my hand, cutting her off. Stop right there. Do you hear yourself? You're listing off basic parenting duties like you handed me some grand luxury. I never asked to be born. I never signed a contract saying I owed you anything for raising me. Dad's jaw clenched. You talk like we're strangers or something. I locked eyes with him. Aren't you? Because no real parent would be sitting here trying to guilt-trip their child into writing them a check. Mom's face turned red, and for the first time, she actually looked hurt. Not remorseful. Not ashamed. Just hurt. Like I was the one who had wronged them. You've changed, she said, shaking her head. Ever since you moved out, you've acted like you're better than us. I felt something flicker in my chest. Maybe frustration, maybe sadness, but I pushed it down. I didn't change, I said quietly. I just stopped pretending like all of this was normal. Dad leaned forward, planting his elbows on the table. His face hardened, shifting into something more businesslike. Okay, he said. So you don't want to pay the full amount? Fine. We can negotiate. I blinked. Negotiate. He nodded. I'll knock down the total. Just contribute something. Show some appreciation. I stared at him, trying to figure out if he honestly thought this made sense, or if he was just tossing out bait to see how much he could squeeze out of me. And that is when it really hit me. They never expected me to say no. They figured I would fold, either because I felt guilty or because I did not want to stir up drama. Maybe they thought I was still that quiet kid who worked hard in the background while George got all the attention. But that kid? He was long gone. I took another breath, sat up straighter, and locked eyes with my dad. I'm not negotiating, I said firmly. And I'm not paying a single cent. His face darkened instantly. Mom looked like she might cry. George mumbled something under his breath, but I did not care enough to listen. I picked up my phone off the table and stood. We're done here. Then I turned and walked toward the front door. I half expected them to let me go. Maybe shout something behind me. Maybe hit me with a guilt trip on my way out. But deep down, I thought they would just let me leave. Then Dad's voice cut through the air behind me, low and cold. If you walk out that door, you're cutting ties with this family. I paused, hand hovering over the doorknob. Not because I was second-guessing myself, but because the moment felt all too familiar. This was exactly how they always held control over me, by making me feel like I had to earn my place in their world, by convincing me that if I did not fall in line, I would not belong. But the truth was, I had already been on my own for a long time. I turned my head slightly, just enough to glance back over my shoulder. That already happened a long time ago, I said. And with that, I stepped outside and shut the door behind me. I sat in my car for a minute or two, just staring down at my phone. The screen lit up, Mom was calling. Then a text from Dad. I did not pick up. I had no idea what they thought I would do. Turn back around? Say sorry? Pretend this was all normal and hand them a check? Instead, I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat and started the engine. I had just pulled out of the driveway when another text buzzed in, this one from George. You're being ridiculous. Just give them something and move on. I let out a scoff and flipped my phone face down on the seat. Of course, that is what George would say. But I knew better. Paying them anything would not fix a thing. If I gave in once, it would just open the door for more nonsense later. And yet, even after all that, a small part of me still felt that familiar tug of guilt. That old voice whispering in the back of my head that maybe I was being too cold, too harsh. But then I reminded myself, they were not asking for support. They were demanding compensation. And they would never, not in a million years, expect the same thing from George. That reminder was enough to shut the guilt down completely. The whole way home, their words echoed in my head. Every glance, every sentence. Especially the way Dad kept adjusting his tone, like he was still calculating the best way to get under my skin. By the time I got back to my apartment, I had already made up my mind. I was not just going to walk away from it. I was going to make sure they never had the chance to pull something like this again. I fired up my laptop and started digging. Old emails, bank records, messages, anything I could get my hands on. Even the documents from when Grandpa passed away. It did not take long to find what I needed. A direct deposit into their account, $15,000, clearly labeled temporary help. Then a message from Mom, sent a few days later. Thank you so much. We'll pay you back soon. Love you. And after that, silence. No repayment. No follow-up. Just nothing. I kept digging, flipping through years of statements. And that is when I saw it. The withdrawal from my savings account. The one I had spent years building up, drained in a single hit. They told me they were just borrowing it. Said it was to help George get back on his feet. Promised I would get it back as soon as he was stable. That was 8 years ago. I leaned back in my chair, tapping my fingers on the desk. They had taken thousands from me, all under the guise of helping the family. They had drained the inheritance that my grandfather left for me. And now, after all that, they had the nerve to come after me for even more? I clenched my jaw. Fine. If they wanted to treat this like a business deal, I would play along. But I was not going to ask for the money back, not directly. I already knew they would never give it to me willingly, but I had something better than a request. I had leverage. I spent the next few hours piecing together everything I had: bank records, messages, proof of transactions. I bundled it all neatly into a folder on my desktop and labeled it something simple: family finances. Then I did something I had not done in years. I called my Uncle Ray. He is my mom's older brother. He and my parents had always had a rocky relationship, but he was the one person in the family I still had a bit of trust in. More importantly, he had been the executor of my grandfather's estate. When he answered, his voice was friendly but guarded. "Hey, kid. Been a while." "Hey, Uncle Ray," I said, doing my best to sound calm. "I have a quick question about Grandpa's will." There was a short pause, followed by a sigh. "I was wondering when you'd ask." My stomach tightened. "So you knew." "Not everything," he admitted. "But I knew your folks took what was meant for you. Your grandfather set aside money for both you and George. Equal shares. But when I asked about it, your mom told me you had agreed to let them manage your portion." I let out a bitter laugh. "Manage it? They bled it dry. Spent it all on themselves and George." He sighed. "That's pretty low, even for them." I hesitated for a second. "Is there anything I can do?" Another pause. Then, in a quiet voice, he said, "Actually, yeah, there might be. Because the inheritance had been specifically earmarked for me, and I never signed anything handing it over, I still had a legal claim to it. It would take some effort. I would need to get a lawyer involved. But with the documentation I had, proof they took the money and spent it without my knowledge, there was a real case to be made." I thanked Uncle Ray, hung up, and just stared at the computer screen for a while. The next day, I contacted a lawyer, a friend of a friend, someone who handled estate disputes. I sent him everything. All the records, every message, the whole story. After reviewing it all, his reply was simple: "You've got a case." It took a few weeks to gather the necessary paperwork and get things officially filed. During that time, I ignored every call from my parents. I didn't answer George's snide, passive-aggressive texts. I let them sit in silence, probably thinking I had let it all go. Then the legal notice arrived at their door. That is when the chaos really kicked off. Mom was the first to show up at my apartment. She banged on the door like the building was on fire. The moment I cracked it open, she was shouting, "How could you do this to your own family?" I kept my cool. "I'm just taking back what was mine." Next came Dad, calling me with that cold, controlled tone he always used when he wanted to sound reasonable. "You don't want to go through with this," he said. It was more threat than warning, but I did. Then George texted me, "You're out of your mind. You're tearing this family apart over money." I didn't respond, because the truth is, I wasn't the one who tore the family apart. They did. They were the ones who stole from me, lied to me, and then tried to bleed me dry one more time. All I had done was finally draw the line, and for once, they were being held accountable. They did not have the money to just pay me back. So, we ended up settling in court. They had to sell off some assets, like their prized vacation timeshare, to come up with part of what they owed me. And George? He was livid, because for the first time, his cushy little world was affected. They tried every angle to make me feel guilty, tried to make me out to be the villain in the story. But manipulation only works when you care about someone's opinion, and I didn't care anymore. So, that is where things stand now. My parents took a big financial hit. They sold the timeshare, downsized their house, and had to make some sacrifices to pay what the court ordered. According to Uncle Ray, they are telling the rest of the family that I sued them over some misunderstanding, that I ruined their lives for a little bit of money. George has completely cut me off. No surprise there. Last I heard, he's still whining to anyone who will listen about how unfair it all was. Meanwhile, he continues enjoying the things he got at my expense: money, support, everything they took from me and handed to him. Not once has he offered to repay any of it. As for me, I feel free. No more guilt, no more pressure, no more waiting for the next demand to drop out of the sky. I finally stood up for myself, and even though it caused a massive rift in the family, I do not regret it for a second. Now, I get it. Some people might hear this story and think I went too far, that I was cruel or cold for taking legal action against my own parents. So I'll ask you, Was I the A*** hole for making them pay me back through the courts? Was it too much? Or was I finally just doing what needed to be done? Let me know what you think in the comments. And if you have ever been used or manipulated by your own family, feel free to share your story. Like and subscribe for more stories just like this one.